So today I'm going to be unboxing this, the AMD Ryzen 7 2700X. Now this is an AM4 CPU, it's got 8 cores and 16 threads, and it's a second generation Ryzen. So let's get into it. Right, so here we go. First of all, we'll have a little look at the box. As we can see on the top here, you might not be able to see that because of the light. It says 8 cores, 16 threads, 4.3 GHz max boost and 3.7 GHz base. So I guess the max boost is probably if you're overclocking it. I probably won't be doing that, but I'll probably try the PBR, the Precision Boost Overdrive, and see what sort of performance boost you get out of that. It'll be interesting to see. The outside of the box, first of all, you see they put the CPU right at the edge there, which does look cool, but I do wonder if that's a bit risky. If you drop the box on a corner or something, the CPU is going to take the brunt of the impact. But luckily this box doesn't look like it's been dropped, so that's fine. It also has a nice picture of the really cool RGB cooler you get with this one. I'm really looking forward to, in my new build, setting up all the RGB and seeing how it all looks. Right, now let's do the actual cutting of the label. Let's see, so we can get into the thing. Oh, there we go. Alright. Ooh, magic. Let's have a look at this. So first we'll just slide out the processor itself. Oh, that's pretty cool. So in there it's got the little sticker as well, so you can put that on the front of your case or wherever you might like to put it on your fridge, wherever. And a little box for the CPU itself. So that's the part you've got to be really careful with, that's the expensive bit. Next up, looks like the cooler is also in its own little box. Yep, so you can see the fan at the top there. That's the, it looks like it's got part of the RGB on the inside rim and part on the outside, but we'll just have a look. Plastic covering. Let's check this out. Oh, that's pretty cool. That's a beefy cooler. I'll just show you as well. One of the performance tweaks they've made with CPU coolers in recent years, and graphics card coolers as well, is these pipes. They help to regulate the temperature a lot better around the cooler itself. I won't go into the physics of it, but I was watching a Linus video where he went into the physics, and it's really quite cool with how it is a relatively simple thing, but it allows the heat to be dissipated much faster around it. Also, compared to some older CPU coolers I've had, it's a nice big fan, which should, in theory, mean it's a bit quieter. So that would be cool to see. You can just see there's like a light grey thing around the edge here. That's obviously the RGB as well, so that whole part should light up. And I think possibly something in the inside there, but I'm not sure. I guess I'll see. Oh, it's actually got, that's what it is. So there's a rim on the top and a rim underneath, and I guess that's probably one RGB strip that allows it to change colour, hopefully controllable by the user. It's got just two cables coming off of it. All three, in fact, multiple cables. So one of them is the basic CPU cooler, CPU fan, and some of the other ones are for the RGB. I will have to figure out how I put those in. Oh, there it is there. There's a little port in the side, that's for the RGB, I believe. Oh no, that's not a port, sorry, that's a switch. I guess I'll have to find out what that's about when I'm building it. Also, I won't take it out any further because I know that the heat gel is pre-applied to this, and once you take that off, it's you want to apply it to the CPU as quickly as possible, so it doesn't start to dry out at all. But I'll just put that back in the box there. Back away brilliantly. Right, and then there's one more thing here. Oh no, there's nothing else. No, that's empty. I was kind of expecting some sort of instructions on how to properly handle your CPU, but the motherboard tells you that anyway. But yeah, so there it is. Should I take it out? I think I'm relatively statically discharged, so let's take out the CPU as well. Get a little look at this up close. Yeah, there it is. Nice Ryzen CPU. Ryzen 7 2700X, so they didn't put the wrong one in the box, so that's good. And you can just see all of the hundreds of little tiny pins on the underside there. That is going to be quite cool once it goes in. I can't wait to see it. So there we go. So to start the kind of review section of the video, I guess I'll start with actually how the process was to install and to attach the cooler. These motherboards, these AM4 boards, they've got like a little tiny lever that you pull up, so you can just drop the CPU straight in the slot, as long as you've got it properly aligned in the correct orientation. Now they've got a tiny little triangle on the side, and you've got to align that to the motherboard. What I did notice is that they've actually got a triangle on all four corners. One of them's gold, I think it was. I'm pretty sure the older ones had a really obvious, it was only on one corner would be the triangle. So it was like, is it definitely that one? And put it in the right way. And it went straight in. But it wasn't quite as clear as previous ones had been, in my opinion. But yeah, pop in the CPU, then you pull down the little lever again and it just kind of clamps in. No pressure had to be applied at that point in time. Now I didn't need to apply any of the gel, the thermal gel, that came pre-applied on the cooler. So I just had to make sure that I was oriented the correct way, the cooler, so that it had the AMD text towards the top. And you lower it down, hook it in one side, and you realise, I need to put quite a lot of pressure on this other side of the clamp to close down the chassis of the cooler. It took quite a lot of, basically I had to really push quite hard on one side, on the other side, to get that clamp over to the point that you're thinking, right, I'm building it on top of the motherboard box. I'm thinking, am I going to collapse the box while I'm doing this? But it did go on, and it wasn't too bad. It's just I never like having to put that much pressure on something that you know is this like 150 quid very expensive small piece of equipment. So I had to do that. But then once it's down, you know, you've got like another little lever on the cooler itself that you just kind of pop over, and then it's clamped and it's in place and it's very solidly on there. So that's brilliant. The next thing you had to do, you had the little cables in the side, and this is like they gave you two. Oh, sorry, it's actually three cables. One's always attached, and that's for the actual CPU fan. So that goes into a nice standard place on your motherboard, nice and close. And it's, you know, it's only a small cable, so it's not too much. You don't really have to cable manage it. It's kind of out the way. The other two cables they give you are both for the RGB. We only use one of them. So you've got the option of plugging it into one of the USB headers on the motherboard, or there's an RGB header specifically for the CPU. I just went for that one because it was the port on the motherboard that was closest to the CPU. So I thought, right, nice and close, so I'll just put these two in here. The other one would have had to go all the way from the CPU to the bottom of the motherboard, and that would have been a bit of a gangly cable. I believe it gives you more control over the RGB if you use that cable, but the one that I've put in seems fine. You can the Aorus software on my motherboard detects it, and it can control it just fine, change the color to whatever I want. So that's fine for me. But the other problem then was this cable that is both comes from the CPU, plugs in right next to the CPU. This one's for the RGB. It was actually quite a long cable, so I had to cable manage that around into the case, beneath the back case fan, and just kind of clamp it into the side. Managed it, but it's just kind of, there's quite a lot of cable there for you know, almost unnecessarily. But I guess they don't know, because it's obviously a different can be on different motherboards. They don't know how far away the motherboard manufacturer is going to put that port. But once that was in, cable managed, it's installed, and it was all good. and I'll put a little bit of a video here of when I just finished building the motherboard, because I built it outside the case first of all, so that I could run the post and make sure everything was working before going to the effort of putting it in, just in case something was broken. So I'll put that video here and you can see how it looks. So this is a little test of the CPU performance for gaming. I am playing Warcraft here, and although it's hard to tell specifically what benefit the CPU is giving, it is very smooth. There's no problems at all. Now, yeah, unfortunately this is a full system upgrade, so I'm running a new graphics card, new M.2 SSD, new RAM, and a new CPU. But I think if there was, if the CPU was a bottleneck, it would be having issues. One thing I noticed is loading into new areas in Warcraft is very, very quick. That's probably mostly the M.2 drive. It's an NVMe one, so they're like super fast. So that's cool. But certainly doesn't seem to be any problems caused by the AMD CPU, even though I've picked the 2700X, which is more a workstation processor than a gaming processor, because it's got more cores rather than fewer, faster cores. But it seems to be performing brilliantly for games. Right, so now I'm going to try and rate the actual performance of the CPU. You can see here I've got the task manager, and I've got it set to show all of the threads that the CPU can handle. Because I'm running OBS, it's using a little bit of background on one of the threads there, you can see. And I've also got this tool called User Benchmark. This is from userbenchmark.com, and this actually benchmarks your whole system, but it gives you quite a good measurement of the CPU individually as well. So I'm going to just run this now, and we will see what it kicks out. So as it goes, immediately you can start to see all of the spikes on the CPU cores as it starts to use them. And in a minute we'll do a little graphics test as well, and unfortunately I can't capture that part of the process because I'd have to capture the whole window, and a little bit awkward. But it's basically just that part's just testing the graphics card anyway. It's kind of going through a few different kinds of scenes, which I assume are using things like ray tracing and these kind of things that are quite intense. It does seem to blast through them. It's really smooth, but those are really just testing the graphics card, not the actual CPU. But yeah, you can clearly see from the graphs here all the spikes. It's given it a run for its money. Right, so I'll just flick over to this other scene, and here are the results. Now it's got a little warning here. It says suboptimal background CPU. Because I'm using OBS, I can't really disable that, but I have done a test. You see, if you see at the bottom here, it says run history, and I've done a few tests, and the first one was with no background stuff. It was just the system was quite clean. So if we scroll down, we will see for our CPU, AMD Ryzen 7 2700X. It gives a little price for that, and that's I think that's pretty close to what I paid for actually. I got it on Amazon.co.uk as well, and it is performing above expectations, which is fantastic. You can see there it's above the average for the CPU. What I assume that means is that some people might be running the same CPU in an older motherboard or with slower RAM or something. There's some other bottleneck that's slowing it down slightly. I haven't overclocked mine at all. Some of the higher ones could be overclocked, but I'm quite happy that it's around and above average. That's pretty good for me. The graphics card, it says they're performing as expected. Now that was in the first test I ran. It was that was above expected. So I'm assuming that the overhead of recording the screen has had a little bit of an effect on the graphics card as well. And that's probably because I'm using hardware encoding, so it's probably using part of the graphics card to do the encoding, which means it can't be there for doing the actual performance. The SSD performing as expected as well. That's great. Again, I'm pretty sure that was above average a minute ago, so because it's writing as it's recording, that's going to affect it a little bit as well. Now the RAM is performing below expectations because at the moment I haven't got the boost thing that it does to pull it up to the full speed, so it's running at quite a safe low clock speed. Doesn't seem to cause the system any problems running at a slow rate, but I would rather be able to pull up the clock speed of the RAM. So that's something I've got to test later on, but it's not really relevant for the CPU. The CPU main thing seems to perform really well, and this is quite a average price build as well. There's none of the components are crazy expensive. So I've tested the performance of this in another couple of areas now, and that is compiling my video game project. It was really quick for doing that, and editing this video, and it was fast for doing that as well. In editing, you've got a lot of clips along a timeline, and you're moving things around, and it all seems to be really smooth under this processor. Now, if I was building a system specifically for games, I might not choose this processor because it's got more cores and it's suitable for applications where you are using a lot of threads, such as compilation, video editing, rendering, these kind of things. If I was doing a system dedicated to gaming and maybe streaming, I'd possibly choose the Ryzen 5 3600X, and that would have the benefit of being a more modern processor because the 3600 is the 3rd generation Ryzen. This is from the 2nd generation, and the cores in that, although it's a 6-core processor and 12 threads, the individual cores are faster performing. So you would generally get slightly better game performance from one of those CPUs. But the price list, this is actually cheaper than the 3600X. This is floating around about £165 on Amazon at the moment, and you can do a full system build based on this processor quite cheap. If you go up to the 3600, you might want to get an X570 motherboard, whereas this one is using an X470 chip, which is being a little bit older, it's a little bit cheaper. So the 570 being a little bit newer and faster, you pay a little bit more of a premium, so it might be a more expensive system if you're going up to that level. But all in all, this one it really seems to be good value for the money. And that was with me even going paying a little bit more for RGB components because I wanted a really visually nice looking system. But I hope this has been a useful video for some people, and it might give you some information that you can use in choosing your next CPU. So thanks for watching. Please hit me up for subscribe, that'd be really useful, and catch you next time.